According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the closure rate on murder cases in 2017 was only 52%. The rest went unsolved, and that's all contributing to an ever-growing number of cold cases that are stacking up in a database somewhere. It's estimated that across the country, there are around 250,000 unsolved murder cases that are still open. Recent advances in DNA technology means there is a possibility that some of these offenders will eventually be caught. Look at the example of the Golden State Killer, a serial killer who was tied to crimes that spanned decades. He started slaying his victims in 1976, but was only identified and nabbed by the police in 2018. Let's take a look at some of the most prolific serial killers that are still out there doing their dirty work as we speak. Pedro Alonso Lopez, the monster of the Andes. The most commonly accepted definition of a serial killer is someone who commits 3 or more murders within a period longer than a month. They typically then lay low for a bit in a cooling down period before getting back to what they do best, killing. Here we have the case of Pedro Lopez, a Colombian serial killer who has left a trail of blood behind him all across South America. The horrifying thing is he's still very much at large and has killed way more than just 3 people. Lopez's affinity for assault and murder started when he was young. He was born in 1948. In 1980, he was arrested in Ecuador. It was while he was in custody there that he confessed to 110 murders in Ecuador alone, and later he added 240 more victims across several other neighboring countries. He preferred his victims to be children between the ages of 7 and 12 and was a suspect in another 300 or so brutal slayings. Prosecuting him would be incredibly difficult, but his story actually gets more disturbing if you can believe that. He served 14 years of a 16-year sentence in Ecuador when he was given an early release for good behavior. He was then shipped back to his native country of Colombia and put on trial for the murders he allegedly committed there. The trial ended with him being committed to a psychiatric institution. He stayed there under lock and key for 4 years until '98. He was then released on good behavior once again with a $50 bail. He hasn't been seen ever since, but he has since been implicated in even more killings. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, despite its morbid nature, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And stick around to learn about 5 more potential serial killers likely still alive and living in secrecy. The Long Island serial killer. It took a while for the full scale of this unnerving case to come to light, but when it finally did, it became what's been called the biggest unsolved murder case in New York's history. It started with a 23-minute-long 911 call placed by a woman named Shannon Gilbert. She was an escort who had been dropped off by one of her clients at his home. A few hours later, she escaped the home, ran to a nearby neighbor's house, asked for help, and disappeared without a trace. This all went down in May of 2010, but it wasn't until December of that year that an investigation into Gilbert's disappearance started turning up bodies left and right along Long Island's Gilgo Beach. Some of the victims that were pulled from the beach included Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who had been reported missing for 3 years, and Megan Waterman, who left behind a 3-year-old little girl when she seemingly vanished into thin air. The total count of all bodies found in the following months rose to 10. More than a decade later, the perpetrator is still at large, and 5 of the women found along that dismal stretch of coastline remain unidentified. The case is still active, and reportedly some new evidence has recently been found, including a photo of a belt engraved with the initials of WH or HM, an unidentified serial killer preying on Chicago women. This past January, the Chicago Sun-Times ran a profile piece on Gwendolyn Williams. She loved to dance and was a fervent protector of her little brothers and sisters. She taught them how to live an upright life, encouraged them to chase their dreams and stay in church. She was a gifted cook and was referred to by her family as their guardian angel. Her body, covered in defensive wounds, was found on June 12, 2002. She had clear signs of being in some kind of struggle with skin under nails and bruises all over her body. It wasn't just Williams either who was the victim of her elusive killer. Chicago police suspect she's one of 51 Chicago women who have been the victims of a serial killer who has been terrorizing the city since 2001. But according to that profile piece run by the Chicago Sun-Times, the victim count might just be as high as 75. In late 2020, investigators had collected a trove of non-matching DNA samples in the case, but cautioned that the lack of DNA in the majority of the murders signaled that the killer was probably very intelligent and meticulous when committing their crimes. The Killing Fields murders. The Killing Fields, according to a 1999 issue of Texas Monthly magazine, is the name given to a strip of abandoned oil fields off of Interstate 45 that have long been known to be a favorite dumping site for killers. In 1994, it was reported that the bodies of 4 naked, carefully posed women were pulled from the location. At the time, police had a suspect named Robert Abel in their sights. He was a NASA engineer who worked on the original Apollo missions. Abel was about 60 when the murders and several other disappearances happened. Unfortunately, law enforcement had to concede that they had no evidence to prove Abel had anything to do with the murders. Abel maintained his innocence, but it's undeniable that some kind of serial killer was afoot. The 30-plus women who have been killed or gone missing over the course of several decades are sometimes referred to as the I-45 killings. 2 of those 4 women we mentioned earlier were only identified in 2019, even though they were placed in that field in the mid-80s. The Killing Fields have since been turned into a memorial for all missing persons by one of the victims' fathers, and hopefully someday the killer will be caught and forced to pay for their crimes. The Jeff Davis 8. That's the name that's been given to 8 women from Jennings, Louisiana, who were slaughtered in regular intervals between 2005 and 2009. Each victim was between 17 and 30, and they were all connected in some way with the region's drug and sex work trade. In the fall of 2009, the police went on the record to state that the murders were without a doubt the work of one serial killer, and they added they were willing to offer a reward leading to their arrest. But not everyone was so sure that a serial killer was on the loose. Local journalist and investigator Ethan Brown wrote about the case in his book, Murder in the Bayou. He believed all the victims had some sort of relationship, be it sexual in nature or as informants, with the local police. That fact, coupled with the truth that they all shared the same pimp, a man named Frankie Richard, led him to believe the women died in some kind of massive cover-up. Whether the killer or killers were from law enforcement or not, the case still remains unsolved and the truth remains undiscovered. The Highway of Tears killer. There's a long stretch of road in Canada called Yellowhead Highway 16 between the towns of Prince Rupert and Prince George, where the scenery includes ominous billboards warning women not to hitchhike. The local authorities put them there because so many bodies have been found along this stretch that it's now infamously known as the Highway of Tears. It's unknown just how many victims have met their tragic end along this stretch of roadway, even though the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officially say the number is 18. Human rights organizations and indigenous groups in the region say the number is likely closer to 40, as many of those who have disappeared or who have been murdered belong to an oftentimes overlooked and neglected indigenous ethnic group. The numbers date back to 1969, and the most recent was in 2016. The local police believe it's highly likely the majority of these cases will never be solved. A task force called E-PANA was organized in 2005 to investigate the disappearances, but ever since, the number of officers assigned to the troop has dropped from 70 to just 8. Now it's time to hear from you. Which of these stories was the most troubling to hear about? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.